Good morning, world. I'm Steve Rao, the host of Pod TV's World Edition. In our World Edition, we bring you news from around the world, talk about innovation, and what we can do to build back better and stronger as a world as we emerge from the pandemic in the United States of America. And it's really critically important that we work with other nations in the world. On that note, my monologue today is about Israel. We're going to talk a little bit about Israel today. We're going to talk about different things going on in the country and the world, from the Andrew Brown decision of the fact that his shooting was justified. We're going to talk about that. And we're going to talk about a number of other things. But the deadly violence in Israel and Gaza isn't just, in my opinion, an urgent foreign policy crisis for our president. It's also a political debate in Washington among Democrats who are increasingly divided over America's traditional support for Israel. President Biden is under mounting pressure from liberals and progressives in his own party who want a stronger support for the Palestinians and claim that the president is being weak on this issue and that he hasn't altered his foreign policy of a support of a hardline government by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. This week, I reminded our viewers that it was President Trump who supported moving the embassy to Jerusalem, although there has been claims that East Jerusalem is the capital of is the central city of the Palestinian state. President Biden called this move frivolous and wrong and said that it was ridiculous. And he's continued to criticize President Trump's foreign policies. The movement for a more balanced U.S. policy that is pro-Israel, pro-peace, and anti-occupation is a tough balance. It's a tough balancing act. And I don't think any president of the United States has really had success in bringing peace to the Middle East, unless you look at President Jimmy Carter with the Camp David Accords. Tensions continue to mount as now the Congress has been notified on May 5th that there was an approval of $735 million for precision-guided weapons to Israel. And this is in addition to the $3 billion of security assistance that's provided to Israel. Senator Bernie Sanders and others are asking for more strings to be attached and asking that President Biden clearly support the Palestinian state more than he is. I could go on, but folks, this is a hot mess. This has been a hotbed of conflict and disruption in our world for as long as I can remember. My entire life in the United States, I have watched and heard of the horrors of Middle East war. When will it end? What can this president do? And what can we do on World Edition to provide our insight and input to our president, to our Congress, to our Senate on what the United States policy for Israel should be? On that note, I bring with us Mark Lee, Sasha Starr,
Good morning.
and the conservative fiery one, Shaquille Latimer. Just joking.
Yes, the white. I'm the white guy. Everyone who's watching, just remember, I'm the white conservative.
So,
believe in things like equal rights.
yes.
Good for you.
And I'm just going to start off with what we shouldn't do is take a policy of build back better and try to impose that on the world. It's not working out too well in the United States just yet. You know, let's just leave the world alone and see if we can just get the US right first.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, and we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about that. Let's start with Sasha Starr. Sasha, what is your thought about Israel?
First of all, I don't think that we should talk just about Israel. We may talk also about Hamas. We may talk about the United States. Let me ask you this. If your country is being bombarded by 3,000 rockets and people are being killed, let's say it's not Israel, let's say it's Washington, D.C., what would you do? I'm interested. Would you talk, oh, please stop this rockets? Oh, you don't want to stop the rockets? Okay, continue for another 2-3 days, but please, we don't like it. The people are dying. Is that something what you would do? Probably not. Every country has a right to defend its citizens, and it's not right. It's responsibility. There is no country, there is no government which cannot protect its citizens. So, to do it effectively, to do it the right way, first of all, forget about all the noises. United States, Russia, China, whoever is there is. Just forget it's all noise. It's nothing. Nothing will stop Israel from protecting its citizens. That's why they exist. There would be no government. Israel doesn't need any government which cannot protect its citizens. So to do it right, what you have to do? You have to make sure that either Hamas or whatever organization which will replace Hamas, if there will be something to replace, it has to destroy its attacking capacities. It has to destroy all the rockets what they still have. The estimation is that they have about 30,000 rockets. They fired 3,000, so they have approximately 27,000 rockets still there. They have to find, destroy, number one. Number two, destroy all capacities of Hamas to produce more of those rockets, so it will never happen in the future. Number three, eliminate decision makers, people who are saying, "Oh, fire the rockets." Why? How this terrorist organization, good for nothing, can fire rockets at independent state of Israel? It's impossible. It will be punished. And by the way, I just started to understand what a brilliant way of conducting war Israel did. They, remember, a few days ago, they amassed enormous amount of artillery, tanks, and so on. Sort of everybody would think that they would invade Gaza. And it was logical. Of course, you have to invade to find all those rockets and to eliminate all the commanders and so on. But they were staying there for a couple of days without moving in. And in the meantime, because Hamas, how should I say, management, they also knew the same thing. So they were on run to the tunnels. They have 100 kilometers of built tunnels to keep their arms, to hide, to do the terrorist act, and so on. Once that happened, Israel artillery and, most importantly, aviation, they striked at all these tunnels, killing so many people who were hiding there. So that was a brilliant. It almost like, come here. Oh, you're already there. Okay. Now, another thing is about this building, what they destroy with some news organizations. Wait a sec. They were hiding sophisticated electronic equipment. They were hiding behind this journalist, and as they always do, they're hiding behind their children and wives' human shield. This is their tactics for the last 70 years. That's what they're doing. Now, why they did need all that? Because they're sponsored by Iran and possibly Qatar. So they want to show that, okay, you're giving us money. Here is what we do for your money. Okay, here we're going to do a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Give us more money. No, this time it's not going to continue anymore like that. Because they disturb a peaceful nation where Arabs who are citizens of Israel, they have the same rights. They're peaceful people. They're working together with Israelis. But now, the situation is more complicated because some of these people, they supported the uprising. And now Israelis, neighbors, now they're asking themselves how much we can trust these people. So this is incredible tragedy, what's happening there. But Israeli forces, by far superior to anything in that region, they will take care. They have to take care. Otherwise, nobody needs them. They have to defend their city.
What are your thoughts? We're going to talk about Andrew Brown Table. Shasha, thank you so much. Very good points there. Mark Lee, what are your thoughts about Israel? What should our policy be?
Well, I've said all along, and I know that Shaquille says that pretty much the whole world wants it, but you can say the whole world wants it, but we still need to make a way to happen the two-state solution, because we definitely need to find a way to have a free Palestinian nation. I've been a supporter of that pretty much ever since learning about the conflict as when I really got involved in studying news and everything as a teenager, and I'm now in my late 50s and everything. So it's been something that I've been definitely part of and wanting for a while. Will it happen in my lifetime? At this rate, I'm thinking probably not, but I can always be the optimist and hope that it does happen, and definitely that it happens within maybe the next 5 to 10 years. But with all of this conflict, it may not happen within the next frame of that magnitude. So we're going to see what happens in that regards. One of the things that you may find interesting, and maybe you could do this in Morrisville, but did you know that this is one of those little interesting facts? And I know that Shaquille may find this kind of funny, because why would even Israel care? But apparently, 3 years ago, Durham actually was the first city that actually voted unanimously to bar its police department from taking part in military-style training programs abroad. And that was actually a direct slap at Israel. So they actually did that 3 years ago. And as far as I know, it's still in impact and everything. So the council opposed international exchanges with any country in which Durham officers receive military-style training, since such exchanges do not support the kind of policing that we want here in the city of Durham, is what the statement read some 3 years ago. So they were actually seeing some of this militarization kind of stuff that is going on in the police departments over there in Israel. And it kind of ties into what the other conversation we're going to have are spreading into our United States cities. So they actually voted to ban those kinds of relationships. There was actually a coalition that was put together called Demilitarized Durham Palestine Coalition, which is a group of 10 organizations that were trying to see ways to not necessarily work with the Jewish population that is suppressing people in some ways. And Shaquille will be glad to know that it was made up of a lot of different folks, including some even from the Jewish community, because I know that one of the members of that group was the Jewish Voice for Peace, which supports the boycott, divestment, and sanction movements, which has also been targeting Israel during the course of the last several years and everything. So that's just some of the thoughts that I have and everything. But I'd love to hear folks
Mark,
talk about those small cities.
there are a lot of wonderful Jewish groups. One is Jews for Peace, another one Jews for Jesus, and many others. They're all wonderful people. I pray for them. And there is another one, what's his name? Sanders. Who is a Jew, and at the same time he is rooting for Palestinians and so on. By the way, anybody knows here who are the Palestinians? If not, I will explain.
Please explain. Please explain.
Okay, let me go ahead. Listen carefully. There is no such thing as Palestinians. They are Arabs. They are Arabs. That's it. There is no Palestinians in history of this world. There is no race or religion or any indication what is Palestinians. They are just Arabs who wanted to destroy Israel starting from its inception in 1948, and who are still dreaming about that the day will come and something will happen and so on. Now, they started several wars, not they, but their Arab nations. They started several wars against Israel, lost all of them. All in single one, all of them. And there will be more wars, they will lose more. And with each war, they are losing more and more territory. By the way, you believe that there is a two-state solution. The two-state solution was offered by United Nations in 1948. There is one state, Israel. There is no other state. Why? Either they are unwilling or incapable to create its own state. So go and figure out. If you can't create your own state, what you're trying to do, you're trying to destroy one that was created. I want to tell you.
Let's be clear with when Israel was created. Israel was created in terms of Israel, after the war. And that's when they put a lot of the Jewish population into that area. So we can argue history about whether there were Palestinians in the Bible days or not. So like I said, that's a argument for
there is no such nation as Palestinians.
Well,
Sorry,
let's-
there is not.
let's maybe-
When Romans took over the territory, it was Judea. And Romans, because they hated Jews, they wanted to forget this name Judea, and they started to bring Greeks to absorb this territory, and they invented the Greek name Palestina. What's happened is there was a nation of Philistines, and in Greek they call it Philistine, but they had very, very tiny portion of the territory, and they disappeared 700 years before Romans got involved. So then Turkey was in charge of the territory for centuries, and what was there? There was a desert. There were no water, no cities, no population. It was
Wikipedia would argue against you. Wikipedia would argue against you. It's telling me that the Palestinian Christians and Muslims constituted 90% of the population in 1919, just before the third wave of the Jewish immigration under the post-World War II British Mandatory Authority, which, like I said, that is when the true country of Israel was created after the World War.
Wait! There is no Palestinian at any time after First World War or before Second World War or before First World War. There was never such thing. It was Turkey who ruled this territory without any Palestine. And when English came in, because they were victorious in First World War, so they got divided this territory in Transjordan territory and another territory close to the sea, so they called Palestine, but this was not historical name. And the people who were living there, they were the same Arabs who were citizens of Turkey's empire. So there is no such thing as Palestina.
Like I said, that's what you're saying, but that's not what our lovely friend Wikipedia is saying, because it's saying that the dissolution of the Ottoman Empire and creation of mandatory Palestine replaced the Ottoman citizenship. So it does agree with you about the Ottoman part, with Palestinian citizenship solidifying a national identity, and it's saying that happened like in the early 1900s.
Could we get back to the state of current in Israel and Palestine?
There is no ground under this theory at all, because there was no Palestinian people. There were Arabs who were citizens of Turkey, and that's all what they were, and nothing wrong with that, except one thing. You know that in about 30s, before the start of Second World War, there was a great immigration of Jews to that place, not after the Second World War, after Holocaust or so on. I'm talking about even before. And when they were coming there, of course, they had to leave somewhere, so they were purchasing land or buildings or something to live. And you know what Arabs did? They were threatening their poor friends that no, you cannot sell your land to Jews. Don't do that. We are going to buy from you the land if you want to sell. So they were buying. Hold on, I'm talking.
Okay.
They were buying the land from their poor people, assemble that, and they would sell at inflated prices to Israelis or to Jews. That's what they were doing. Okay. Okay, now talk about Palestinians.
No, I hear what you're saying, but I'm getting ready to direct the conversation back to Shaquille and Steve and everything. But my question, and this is for the entire panel, and we could get into some deep religious troubles here and everything, but hey, this is the Pod TV, and we like to get into trouble and all of that. But that being said, isn't part of the problem that all three of the major religions claim to some degree or another the capital city as part of their lineage and part of their history? I don't care whether you're Muslim, Christian, or Jewish. They all claim it as part of their history, and that's where the conflict has been. And has continued to be, and will probably
No,
always be.
no, this conflict has nothing to do with religion. I was 2 years ago in Israel, I was in Jerusalem, and I was right there. There is a peaceful coexistence. Anybody can visit the Muslim side, the Jewish side, the Christian side, and there is also Armenian quarter. Now, Armenian, I understand Armenian Christianity is somewhat different from other types of Christianity. So, but you could visit all of them. They're very peaceful, beautiful, and they always coexist. Now, this terrorist organization supported by Iran, Hamas, has nothing to do with religion. It's a terrorist organization which is all they're trying to do is to kill innocent people to get more money. All their business is to find and build all these tunnels, to build more rockets. That's all what they're doing. Actually, Hamas is the biggest employer in the Gaza sector. And the employment is to build more tunnels and to build more rockets. I'm done.
All right.
Well,
Well,
all right.
Shaquille, I was going to jump back to Shaquille's question because that's actually what I was asking and everything. But one of the things I've always been curious about is I've never been a supporter of Hamas. I've thought that they were overly militant and somewhat of the extremes of the militants. But, the earlier version, I thought that they were a little bit more moderate. But, sometimes if moderate organizations are pushed out, then the extremists come in. And that was the PLO. And not everybody was a fan of the PLO, but I actually thought that they had the right idea in the earlier days and all of that. And I actually would compare the PLO to some degree to our Native American populations. And some people would even say that there are similar reservation sites in both Israel and in South America. So some people would not South America, South Africa. So some people would make parallels between South Africa, Israel, and even our Native American population. You've traveled the world, Shaquille. What are your thoughts?
I haven't been to Israel or Palestine, for that matter. Look, if we can just deal with the current state of events in Israel and Palestine, I think that the issues are, as always in that region, are very, very complicated, and they have a very twisty, turny kind of history. A lot of this conflict has had to do with the actions of third countries that have nothing really to do with that region. Palestine, of course, was something that the British, had to create and protect. The Jewish, especially after the World War, needed somewhere to go. I think that we've seen a lot of cases where Israel has tried to negotiate with other Middle Eastern countries, with other Arab countries, and those other Arab countries have refused to recognize Israel at all. And so therefore, there is not going to be any negotiation. It is complicated. I think that the quartet of Russia, the United States, the EU, and the UN really need to try and address both sides. And the fact of the matter is that, I'm very hesitant to ever take a side. The Israelis, have this right or don't have that right, or the Palestinians have this right or don't have that right. I think we're too far away to really understand. But I can certainly say that most of the world says that there should be a two-state solution. Most of the people, even in the West Bank, even in the Gaza Strip, the people living there want to see a two-state solution. And some of the issues that come up are things like, what happens with the refugees, freedom of movement, freedom of travel, especially to Jerusalem and to the holy, to the holy sites. So those are all things that are issues, and I think that because of how long this conflict has gone on for, there is a lot of mistrust of the other side. We've come close a few times as a world. We've come close to brokering a peace deal there. I certainly hope that within my lifetime, we actually get a peace deal there, because it's a real tragedy and there's a real human cost on both sides. And I think that anybody who sees what goes on in Palestine can't help but really feel for the people there, for the children that grow up in these circumstances. And you feel, I always feel for Israel. From what I understand, Israel is a beautiful place, and it's horrible that people are living, thinking day to day, is there going to be an attack? Is there going to be a terrorist attack me? Am I still going to be alive? Those sorts of things. I think that's really tragic. And I think that when we try to look at history and try to take a side and say, well, this person's right or that side's right, it does a disservice to the people on the ground. It does a disservice to people who maybe for generations have been told and it's been instilled in them that the other side is wrong. These tensions go back a long way, and we can't just go in and lecture these people and say, well, you shouldn't be there. Sasha, you say that Palestine isn't really a country. That's fine. I don't agree with you, but that's fine. But what should happen to the Palestinians then? What are we going to do?
Let me answer this question. Okay.
They are human beings.
Israel when Israel was created, and there was a division of that country where there were supposed to two states to be built. One is Israel, one is Palestine, or you can call it any other name. Let's call Palestine. I like actually the word. It's very musical. Palestina. It's very musical name. Okay, fine. Who would argue with that? Except one thing. Arabs, they didn't want Palestinians to build anything, because what they wanted is they wanted to eliminate the Israel, so all territory would be Palestine or something else, no Israel on a map. Okay, that's what their plan. That's why they started the 1948 war, the 1956, the 67, the 73, the 82, and so on and on and on. And what's happened with each war? Arabs kept losing territories. They lost more, and in 67 they lost the West Bank and Gaza and just everything what would be possible.
Sasha, my question to you was, if there is no Palestine, what do you think should happen to the current?
Let me tell you something. When the plane, I was flying from Germany, from Munich, I was flying to Tel Aviv. So the last 20 minutes or so, it's flying on the Mediterranean Sea, and all of a sudden you can see the land. And when you see the land, wow! On the left side, you see desert. There is absolutely nothing. It's a desert. And then all of a sudden you see beautiful parks, the buildings, the life goes on, the oranges, the life is there. So on one side, it's a dark, it's a dead desert. And right there, just 500 meters from there, you see the absolutely beautiful life. So instead of building, but you know what? It requires efforts. You have to build that from the scratch. And Palestinians refused to build anything. They won't fight. They're getting fight for the last 70 years or so. And they will get fight if they willing or incapable of building the state.
Wait a minute. Both of you.
One of two. What do you want to take?
Wait a minute. If you're going to argue building, Shaquille and Sasha, if you're going to argue building, isn't one of the greatest buildings in terms of like building nations and everything and building wealth in the Arab community? Because I've got friends that have been to Dubai. They tell me that it's one of the most amazing cities in the world and everything. And that's in the Arab population, if I'm remembering correctly and everything, so the United Arab Emirates. So am I not remembering something, or isn't that a case of the Arabs building a very major, beautiful city that a lot of people are coming to?
Can we just get back to, though, what Steve Rao has asked us as a panel at the beginning of this, right, was really about policy and policy direction of the United States. Now, it's all perfectly fine to go through all of this historical stuff, but you know what? The holy wars in Europe created states and destroyed states, and you know the history of our planet and humanity isn't exactly a pleasant one, right? We've all had all these different conflicts. The people that live in Palestine, they deserve to live somewhere. So if you just get rid of Palestine as a state, what happens to those people was the question that I asked. As for what you've just said, Sasha, look, I've got respect for the Jews. I think that they are entitled to have a homeland. I think that Israel deserves to exist. Okay. But to try to suggest that somehow the Palestinians are these lazy kind of people that have no intention of producing anything other than fighting with Israel. They can't fight with themselves, right? So they're fighting with Israel. Israel's fighting back. And Israel has had the massive advantage of being protected by the majority of the Western world and the majority of the Western world's military. And the majority of the Western world has held back Arab interests in that area. Again, these issues are really complex and complicated. I'm not going to posit that I have an answer or a solution. But what I would say is that any country, and especially the Quartet, should be very careful and very mindful of the needs and wants and desires of the people who actually live there. And the fact remains that for at least the last 2 decades, the majority of people that live in Israel, in Palestine, in the Gaza Strip, in the West Bank, believe in a two-state solution. And I think that the people that live there should be entitled or should be able to expect that those of us that are fortunate enough to live in Western countries will advocate for them to have some level of peace and some level of governance that they have been asking for.
Shakil, you look to me as an intelligent person. Let me ask you this. When there was a decision about two-state solution in 1948 and Israel started to create its state, why Palestinians didn't create their state? Why they're not creating state even today? Why? They have a land. Nobody is taking the land away from them. Why don't they build the state?
The state would have to be, first of all, the state has to be internationally recognized. That's part
No, it's been done in 1948. Shakil, come on.
Well,
Don't say nonsense. It was done in 1948. There was a decision about two-state solution. Israel built its own state. That's fine. Why Palestinians in 70 so years haven't built the state? Why they're not building state today?
Did you want my answer, or are you going to shout me
Yes,
down
I
again?
do. Yes, I do. I really hope you're intelligent enough to understand what
No,
nonsense you're talking about. There is a solution. There is a mandate for two states. But one people, Palestine, they either can't or refuse to build a state.
But
So
remember,
what can
guys,
you do about that?
we're here to carve out a diplomatic solution. We're here to
Clearly, Sasha, I have a lack of intelligence. Right, that would be the issue. I'm
Really?
clearly an intelligent person.
Come on,
I
don't make me laugh. Shakil.
Right? No,
Don't make me laugh.
the issue over there is complicated, and you know when you say,
No, it's not complicated. Come on, when Hamas is throwing rockets,
Sasha,
you know what? Actually, that you know this Iron Dome that protects Israelis from the rockets. That Iron Dome helped a great deal to Hamas. It saved Hamas. If it wouldn't be for Iron Dome and they threw 3,000 rockets, they wouldn't be around already. They would be all killed by now.
well, we're gonna.
Iron Dome saved Hamas.
We've established that you're not interested in my answer or anybody else's comments on this issue. So let me just ask you the question, given you're the expert. Given everything that you've said, what solution are you proposing? Destroying Palestine? Is that the solution you're suggesting?
No. Israel has not destroyed Palestine until Hamas started to throw 3,000 rockets. And they're, you know what? When Israel eliminated this building, when there was all these news agencies, because they had super electronic equipment which was used by Hamas, they gave them warning every time that they have to destroy buildings, because this Hamas people, they're hiding behind children and women and so on. So they give warning. They don't want to kill innocent people. Now, what they're doing by throwing rockets, they are trying to kill and maim peaceful people. They're not fighting Israeli army. Forget about that.
Again, given everything that you've just said, exactly what policy directive do you think the United States should enact to bring about some sort of solution to the conflict in the area?
Build your own state. You have a land, you have people, build the state. Or say we are incapable of building the state. We want to be part of Israel. We want to have Israeli
Their
passport.
ability to build their own state is annexed by the injection of foreign influence into that area. The Arab League and their proposal for how to deal with the conflict is completely different to what the rest of the world, especially the world represented by the Quartet, have suggested as a solution.
I don't understand. What are you suggesting?
Let's hear from Steve. Steve, you had something you
Well,
wanted to add?
yeah, we're going to spend a few more minutes on this and we're going to move on. I think, first of all, we appreciate everyone's passion and we're all intelligent and smart and we all have our own opinions. My question is, we're going to come back to this later in the week. So we're getting close to ceasefire negotiations. So my question is, what should the policy of the Biden administration be moving forward? Because clearly, this is a band-aid. If we have a ceasefire, there's nothing preventing this from happening again. So what advice do you have to President Biden, Secretary of State Blinken, and, in terms of, because quite frankly, I'm not hearing much from any of them. I'm here, and I talked about this yesterday in my monologue. I mean, they're silent on foreign policy. So what do you want the president to do moving forward?
Steve,
if I can jump in, I would love to see something, and you actually referred to it earlier, and that would be if we can have some sort of Camp David Accord where we can get some of the parties together so that we can actually have a conversation, and it may actually have to be a outside force, kind of like what Camp David Accords were, because they all came to Camp David, and that's when they made this kind of temporary agreement. It didn't last that long, but at least it calmed the situation down for a while. So I would love to see those kind of initiatives from Biden.
Okay, so that's point number one. I'm going to email Steve Ricchetti. I'm trying to get Steve Ricchetti on the show, who's the senior advisor. So we want to, because it takes too long to set up these in-person meetings, we're going to get a Zoom call. We're going to get a Zoom call with Netanyahu, Biden, the head of Palestine, the leaders of Hamas, and it's going to be a great Zoom call. Hey, I'm trying to add some humor to those guys. Shaquille, what would you like to see President Biden do?
We're getting a lot of echo, guys. So
sorry.
Look, you know what? So one of the few times I'll say this. I don't think that it's really a US thing in and of itself. Most major countries in the world have some interest in what's going on in Israel and Palestine. I really think there needs to be an international consensus. And part of the thing that has plagued that region for such a long time has been the fact that different world superpowers have had different ideas as to how to fix the issue. And so I really think there needs to be some kind of international agreement and consensus on what should be the solution that also involves the Arab League, that also involves the two countries. I don't think it's something that is just a US issue. And I really don't think it should be something that becomes a political issue in the United States, because look, parties change, the House and the Senate can change, different policies can change. It needs to be a consistent, agreed on, really non-partisan message to help stabilize the region. So I would suggest that President Biden works very closely with the EU at very least, if they can't work with Russia, and that the United Nations and its member representatives are doing everything they can to make sure that everybody is kind of on the same page. Now, having said all of that, as I've said on previous shows, and I think I said earlier, I know these issues are complicated. I am not an expert on Israel-Palestine, so I can't myself posit any kind of solution. I just don't know.
Okay, well, we'll come back to that. Sasha, before we go on to the next issue, what are your thoughts? What advice do you have to President Joe Biden?
Okay, President Joe Biden, I think he has enough to worry about United States of America and mind its business. I think that's the best advice for Joe Biden. He doesn't need to get involved in all that. It's a no-win situation. Regardless what you say or what he'll do, he will not get any benefits from that. So basically, there is no need for any peaceful solution yet, because Israel needs another maybe 2-3 days to completely dissuade Hamas from any further actions for next 45 years. So let Israel to do whatever it has to do, and that's it. And they're trying to do it with at least collateral damage. They're trying to warn the citizens or people in Gaza when they're trying to bomb something to get out of the buildings. It gives them usually 3 hours warning, but never less than 1 hour. Okay, so they're trying to minimize collateral damage. That's the best what they can do under the circumstances.
Well, we're going to be coming back. I don't know where the echo is coming, guys, because I have my headsets on, so I don't know where it's coming from. But we're going to come back to this issue. We're going to go real quickly into an issue in North Carolina. Andrew Brown, a black man who was shot by police officers in Elizabeth City. The district attorney or prosecutor has said that the shooting was justified. I haven't read into this, but Mark, this has really created a flurry of protests. What are your thoughts about what the DA has said?
I was actually surprised at what the DA said, just based on what I've heard on the street level and things of that nature, because it didn't seem like it was a justified shooting. But like you, I'm still trying to get some of the pieces together and trying to get more understanding of why they felt it was justified before wanting to make a statement concretely one way or the other. But from initial reports, it definitely did not seem like a justified shooting. And I think that that's why a lot of folks are still upset and everything. But, that area is a kind of a racial hotbed area anyway. I mean, there is definitely a historically black college and university that's down there. And actually, they were using that to keep some of the police force and some of the other people housed because they sacrificed some of their students in order to do that about a week or so ago. And then there's also not that far from an area that has got some racial divides among both the African American population, the European American population, and the Native American population. So like I said, I was actually surprised, and we'll be curious to see what goes on, because I know a lot of folks here, even in our civil rights communities, are definitely still struggling with that decision and are trying to figure out, what their next steps are going to be in terms of bringing what they feel is justice and all of that. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens in that world and all of that. But I'd love to hear what the other guests have to say. But I did just want to come back to just a quick point on the other conversation, which is sometimes I think we get caught up in semantics, and actually sometimes we can get caught up in semantics as well. And I actually was checking a friend of mine's show. She does one on YouTube and Facebook and everything, and she had a Jewish activist on from Israel, and they were actually talking about the term Zionist. And a lot of people think of Zionist as kind of an imperialistic term, whereas this gentleman was saying that no, it's really about nationalism and about being proud of your nation, and actually got me to thinking about what that term means and how it can be misused. So, sometimes we have to be careful about even the semantics that we use, because Zionist can be very much of a hot button term that a lot of folks use, myself included. So I'd love to hear folks' thoughts on both what's going on in Elizabeth City, but also how we sometimes use semantics in a very negative way.
Oh, okay, yeah, that's a good point. Zionists, any thought on that, Sasha?
Remember the old jokes that I used to say on this show, I think a couple of times, when Brezhnev was still General Secretary of Soviet Union, the Irish Prime Minister declared the war on Soviet Union. He said that this is a communist, antichrist country, and we have to defeat it, and so on. So he phoned Brezhnev and said, I declare a war. So Brezhnev asked him, how many tanks do you have? He says, we have 68 tanks. Brezhnev, we have 25,000. How many warplanes do you have? Oh, we have 76 warplanes. Oh, we have 39,000 warplanes. Then there was a silence, and then Prime Minister Violent says, well, the war is cancelled. I don't understand something. Let's see, Nicaragua, for example, will declare war on United States. How many days of fighting would be there? I mean, probably this is the most incredible situation that one might think about it. So now let me ask you this. How Hamas or Gaza or whatever it might be, Palestinians, let's see, how they can declare a war on Israel, which has probably one of two, not even three, probably two best armies in the world. They have nuclear arms. They have the best electronic equipment, planes, commanders. How dare are you to declare war on a country like this? It's
Sasha,
insane.
It may be insane, but some people can argue that, a very small country declared war on the United States, and some people to this day think we lost that war, and that was the Vietnam War, because there was movements going on within the country, the peace movement, and things of that nature. And even if you want to use your Nicaragua example, under the past leadership, I can't speak for the current leadership, but under the past leadership, they did kind of declare war on the United States, and whether that was through drug trade or whether that was through trying to make alliances. Because I remember that the past leader of Nicaragua actually went into places like Detroit, places like Chicago, and places like that in the urban community in order to try to build alliances with the people in those areas. And so in some kind of ways, that was almost an unofficial war that was going on, and it was somewhat of a successful war, because guerrilla warfare is real.
Mm-hmm. Well,
Sorry, I wonder, Sasha, I don't think that any other panelist on here, myself most especially, has any real position or is taking any real side in the Palestinian-Israel issue. You seem to be quite passionately for Israel, or more so.
Absolutely. I'm not trying to portray myself as independent in this issue.
I'm just going to go. If you're not interested, if I can't even get a sentence or a question out, then I'm just going to go. Okay. You're clearly very passionate about your dislike for Palestine, and you are positing questions to us as if we're supposed to defend Palestine. But none of the rest of us have any real opinion because we don't know the area well enough. So why are you just...
Shaquille, I'm trying to help you. I'm trying to be helpful. I'm trying to get you through the history of this land.
No, what you're
Explain
trying to
who
do
were there. What is going there right now? You're not listening to me. Sorry?
You're trying to get us to accept your view on Palestine.
It's
and
not
I'm not
my
going to
view.
change my mind based on what you said. I don't know the history. It's complicated. The countries of the world haven't been able to solve the issue.
Okay, so let's see. That's you who doesn't know history, who doesn't understand what's going on there.
Oh,
and here I am who knows history, and I'm trying to talk to you. It doesn't make any sense then. Either you listen and try to learn, or you just
and play silly buggers with each other. We can sit here and go, oh, I got you on some fact, or take something you've said out of context. Mark Lee said that Vietnam declared war on the United States. I don't remember Vietnam declaring war on the United States. I don't think the Congress even recognized Vietnam as being at war with the United States. We can sit here and play like little trivia things with history, but what's the point that you're trying to make? Like, you are so against Palestine and you're lecturing us about it like as if we are somehow some great defenders of Palestine or some great haters of Israel. We're not interested in that. We're not taking sides on this conflict, nor should we.
Well, guys,
let me say something.
I'm gonna have Mark Lee close out because I've got to leave a little early today. I apologize, but I want to close my closeout. But first of all, this has been a good show, and please let's try to understand that we're all passionate, and the goal here is to have a healthy debate and set a good example for those watching. So this has been a great show. Real quick,
some of us aren't passionate, though, Steve. Sorry, that's my point. I'm not passionate about Palestine, Israel. I'm taking no sides on that. Mark, are you passionate about the Palestinian-Israel conflict?
No, I've got friends on both sides. I mean, my dad's girlfriend is Jewish, and I've got friends that are on the Palestinian side. So, like I said, I, like you, would like to see that two-state solution, and part of that is, for selfish reasons. I've got people on both sides.
So anyway, So real quickly, on a positive note, I'm going to end my comments today. And Mark Lee, you can end the broadcast today, right?
Yes, I can do that.
Okay. So real quickly, let's end with a positive note. Big day yesterday in the United States. 60 million Americans have at least received their first dose, and and 7 million children have received the first dose of Pfizer that are 12 years and older. Big news for America. It looks like July 4th fireworks celebrations are coming back, and we are getting back to living our lives normal. On that note, President Biden has indicated that in the next 6 weeks, he would like to contribute or donate 20 million doses of the vaccine to other nations. So we're going to be talking about that tomorrow. How would we want the president to divvy this up? My final thought of the week on a positive note is Edwin Fountain, the chairman of the World War I Memorial, who was named by Chris Wallace on Fox News as the Power Player of the Week. It's pretty amazing, World War I. We don't talk about it very much. It was called the war to end all wars. It defined America in terms of America no longer being an isolationist country, but emerging and then bringing together the allies for World War II. but we never talk about World War I very much. So I found that to be interesting. And so it's called the Pershing War Memorial, and it's not on the mall. It's going to be away from the mall with its own campus. But kudos to Ed Fountain and those who made this happen. And I think it's important on World Edition for us to talk about all the wars that were ever fought and its effect on the world order and how we move forward today. And of course, we're dealing with a new warfare, cyber warfare. So, Mark, I'm going to hand the reins over to you. Thank you for a wonderful show, guys. I don't know where the echo is coming from. I was always told to wear headsets and the echo would go away. So I don't know where it's coming from. So
yeah, usually the headset, and sometimes you have to mute the individuals, as Shaquille has been doing, but sometimes that happens. But we'll just try to figure it out and everything and all of that. And sometimes in the call, just like I said about semantics and Shaquille, if Shaquille calls me out, and I will double check and everything, and he was correct. It was not a declared war, so maybe that was a misstatement on my part. So I appreciate you, Shaquille, for actually correcting me, because I will even say in the concept of conversations, I appreciate being corrected as well. So I'm not saying that I'm perfect either.
And gentlemen, I will see you tomorrow morning. Thank you all very much.
Thanks.
What are you saying, Shaquille?
I wasn't actually trying to correct you. I was just trying to say that, like, when we get that petty about things, what difference does it make? The point that you were making was about the war between Vietnam and America, and that a very small country was at war with America. Whether Vietnam declared war first, or the US declared war, or nobody declared war, whatever actually happened didn't have any material effect on the point you were making.
Right.
So I think when we play semantic games like this, it's just silly. We see politicians do this in Parliament and in Congress, where they'll say, "Well, you didn't say this," or you broke the House rules by doing that. And it just becomes gamemanship that doesn't serve any purpose that helps anybody. So that was the point I was trying to make. I was trying to make the point that I hadn't corrected you because it was irrelevant.
Well, I appreciate that, and I definitely appreciate that clarification as well and everything. As we're winding down, and we've definitely had a very impassioned discussion and all of that, but let's get into something a little bit lighter, as Steve would say. And I know that I'm a big sports fan, so we're in the middle of our playoffs, and the hockey team actually here in Carolina won its first game. I think the second game is today and everything, so hopefully they'll be able to pull that off. And I'm rooting for certain things to go on in basketball, like the 76ers to win, just because of my ties to Doc Rivers and everything. But I was just wondering what's going on in the sports world there in Australia. I know that you just recently had a major race, and of course people around the globe are getting ready for the Olympics, and it'll be interesting to see whether we're able to pull that off, because that's actually one of the times that we see the global community coming together. Now, there have been incidences even coming back to like the whole political thing, where things have gone in disarray and there have been attacks. I do remember the Israeli attack that took place way back in the early 70s and all of that. But just right now, what's going on in the sports world, Shaquille and Sasha? And do you think that there's a good chance of us having a successful Tokyo Olympics?
What's happening in the sports world? Look, guys, if you want political or economic commentary from me, no problems. I'm just not into sports, so I'm sorry. So I can't really make much of a comment. I do have friends that are, professional coaches of very big sports teams in Australia, and people are quite surprised that I know very little about the sports that they actually coach. So I'm probably the wrong person to ask. I don't really know what the story is with the Olympics, but I was actually supposed to be at the Olympics, not as a participant, last year. And I really do hope that it goes ahead and it's able to happen in a safe way. Japan, certainly deserves to have it. But other than that, look, I don't really have any commentary on sports, I'm afraid. Sorry.
That's no problem. Sasha, what do you think? Are the Olympics going to take place? And are we going to have to deal with some of our political tensions even on that Olympic platform? You're muted. You're muted, Sasha.
I'm not Sasha. I'm Shaquille, and I'm muted.
So,
I'm on screen still, though.
You know what? I don't understand what's happening today. One face on the screen all the time. Either it's Steve or Shaquille. Not. I don't mind, Shaquille, to see your face as often as possible. But when somebody else talking, I hear Shaquille. Well, I'm not overly optimistic about Japan. Most people in Japan, they just don't want the Olympics at this time, right? So whether the government of Japan will listen to that, there are a lot of financial considerations, so on. So it's very unclear to me. I mean, I'm not a big fan of Olympics anyway. However, I am a big fan, very big fan of football, soccer competitions. And very soon in June, there will be European soccer championship, which is second only to the world soccer championship. So this is the second biggest soccer event, and it will be held, from what I understand, in 12 different countries and 12 different cities. So it will be held in St. Petersburg and London and Paris and Berlin and just all major European cities. So that would be very interesting to see. And they announced that they would allow spectators to come to, and of course you can watch it on TV or internet or different devices. I'm glad that indeed this NHL and NBA, their games are they're going in full swing, and it's very interesting. And from time to time, I'm doing some bets on this NHL and NBA games. And the tennis is doing very well. It's very soon will be French Open, and probably Nadal will. I think Nadal will win every French Open until he'll turn probably 75 or so, because he's so dominant on clay. It's just incredible. I'm just wondering how long is he's going to retain the title. But I think this year it's not going to be easy for him.
No, it seems like he's going to stay there forever. It seems like he will compete forever. I mean, even here in this area, they've been talking about Tom Brady and saying he's going to play till he's 45 or 50, which is next to, that's like almost unheard of in football and in terms of American football. But he's saying he's going to keep going, and I can see Nadal possibly still playing until he's well into his 60s or 70s at the rate he's going.
Just to address, I've had a few messages come in, so just to address a couple of our fans that are watching. Sasha and I are friends, so we are allowed to fight and have a go at each other on air because we actually are friends off air. So, and we're normally friends on air as well. So, so don't be too concerned if it looks like we're arguing. That's the whole point. We like to have a good argument. We're chess players.
Oh, okay. By the way, very soon, in a couple of hours, we are going to have the financial show. We are going to talk about what's happened today to Dow, which is down about 450 points. And most importantly, what's happened to Bitcoin. Bitcoin is falling apart. Shaquille, do you have any information on that?
Well, look, I think it's very interesting, and you know, the cryptos are falling apart. I haven't read the whole thing. I think China, the launch of the Chinese crypto may have some effect on that. But again, this is one of those kind of interesting things for people that try to look for a hedge, because people are looking at gold as a hedge to the markets. People look at, government paper as a hedge to the markets. And I think more recently, people have looked, much to my disgust, people have looked at the cryptos as a hedge. And what are we seeing? The markets come down, the cryptos come down. This is what we saw last year in 2020, where we saw things that were supposed to be negatively correlated all of a sudden moving in unison. So again, the markets are not quite black and white like that. But again, I will maintain that I have a real problem with cryptocurrencies when there's no underlying thing to value it on. It makes it hard for me. I'm not telling other people not to get involved in them. Probably they'll go through the roof, but I just don't understand them.
But you see, well, we are going to discuss it later on the show. See, what bothers me is that Bitcoin was portrayed as an equivalent of cash or gold or some other assets. And because the cash itself is losing value, whether it's US dollar or Canadian dollar or Australian dollar, that doesn't matter. The cash itself is becoming very unattractive because of inflation, because of who knows what. So logically, people would be inclined to get rid of cash, and beside buying stocks and bonds, it would be a Bitcoin or something like that. So, okay, so I don't need cash. Okay, I'm going to have a bunch of Bitcoins. And all of a sudden, in one day, you're losing half of the value of your assets, because Bitcoin was like $65,000 a couple of weeks ago, and today is 31 or something. I mean, that doesn't make any sense. Cash would not.
Well, that's right. And then when it was at 65 and 70,000, people were saying it was going to go to 100,000, and it may well eventually get there. But the real issue is when people talk about the inflationary pressures of fiat currency, they make a valid point. However, it's worth reminding everyone, especially since Bretton Woods, that it wasn't the idea to keep cash as a long-term store of value. Cash was supposed to be a short-term store of value, and more so a short-term way of as a medium of exchange. Now, ordinarily, what you would advise people to do if you were an advisor is to put their surplus cash into assets that are likely to produce an income or increase in value over time. But cryptocurrency can't be both. It can't be an investment vehicle that is going to appreciate over time and be an alternative to cash that is more stable than cash, when it's clearly not more stable and there is no underlying value. You're never going to receive a dividend from it. So what is it? And again, I know I've said it so many times before, but having been one of those few people that actually read the entire statement from the Bank of International Settlements, I agree with their sentiments that it's very difficult to see how Bitcoin or any other cryptocurrency is solving any actual problem that isn't just a problem of perception. And that's why I have real issues with the stability of it. On that, Mark, I think we're at the hour.
Yeah, we're pretty much going to wrap up, and I'm very much going to be fascinated to see what Sasha's got to say about the crypto coins and all of that on his show later on this afternoon. So looking forward to hearing about that. And actually, I might be bringing up on the online dinner party something that I learned recently, which is that apparently even in the middle of a pandemic, the housing market here in the United States is doing quite well. So I've actually talked to a couple of real estate folks, and they're actually shocked that as soon as the house goes on the market, it's like, gone within minutes and all of that. So I might be bringing that up in the conversation, since it came up in some conversations that I had on Clubhouse. So Shaquille, I've joined Clubhouse, so that's a great way to learn great information. And I know you're probably on there, as is Sasha as well. So if you're not, it's the latest app that everybody's real excited about. And I've now joined that family. Thank goodness they finally came to Android.
I'm afraid I've never heard of it, but I'll bear that in mind.
All right, so let's get on out of here, and we'll be back here tomorrow to hear more of these great discussions. It was a very impassioned discussion, and I look forward to more of that on tomorrow. So right now, let's get on out of here.
Okay, tomorrow.